There's a corner in almost every American town that used to mean the same thing everywhere: the drugstore. The place you went at 11 p.m. for a sick kid's medicine. The place that knew your name, your prescriptions, and your grandmother's prescriptions before that. Today, nearly 50 million Americans, 1 in 7, live in what researchers now call a pharmacy desert, an area where that corner is just empty. This didn't happen by accident, and it didn't happen slowly. In the last few years, entire pharmacy chains, some of them more than a century old, have been wiped off the American map. These are 9 of them: the dead, the dying, and the ones quietly deciding whether your town is worth keeping. Number 9. Bartell Drugs. If you're not from Seattle, you've probably never heard of it. If you are from Seattle, it was practically a family member. Founded in 1890, Bartell was the oldest family-owned drugstore chain in America. It survived 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and Amazon rising in its own backyard. What it couldn't survive was being rescued. In 2020, the family sold the chain to Rite Aid, hoping a national giant would secure its future. Instead, Bartell got chained to a sinking ship. When Rite Aid collapsed into bankruptcy, Bartell locations closed alongside it, and the patient files of a 130-year-old Seattle institution were sold off to competitors. The lesson locals took away was brutal. Sometimes the buyout isn't a lifeline. It's an anchor. Number 8. Dwayne Reed. For decades, Dwayne Reed was as New York as yellow cabs, cramped, chaotic drugstores stacked on seemingly every Manhattan block, named after 2 streets in Tribeca. At its peak, it was the city's dominant pharmacy, a brand so local it barely existed outside the 5 boroughs. Walgreens bought it in 2010 for about $1 billion. And then, year by year, the blue and orange signs started disappearing, converted to Walgreens, or simply shut as the company culled its urban footprint. Today, only a scattered handful of locations still carry the name. Nobody held a funeral. The brand is simply evaporating, one lease at a time, which is exactly how most retail deaths actually happen. Number 7. Fred's. Fred's was the pharmacy of the small-town South, hundreds of discount stores with pharmacy counters across Mississippi, Tennessee, Arkansas, places national chains never bothered to fight for. For decades, that was a defensible little empire. Then in 2018, Fred's made a desperate bet. It tried to buy hundreds of divested Rite Aid stores and transform overnight into a national player. The deal collapsed, the debt didn't, and by 2019, Fred's was liquidating everything, every store gone in months. And here's the part that matters. When a Fred's closed, there often wasn't another pharmacy in town. The chain died, and the pharmacy desert map of the rural South grew darker overnight. Number 6. Shopco. Shopco wasn't technically a drugstore. It was a general retailer across the rural Midwest with pharmacies inside. In hundreds of small towns in Wisconsin, Nebraska, and the Dakotas, the Shopco pharmacy counter was quietly the only pharmacy for 30 miles. Private equity bought Shopco in 2005 and loaded it with the usual playbook: debt, sale leasebacks, extracted real estate. By 2019, it was bankrupt and every store closed. Researchers later used Shopco as a textbook case of how one corporate collapse can create dozens of pharmacy deserts simultaneously, because in rural America there was no backup. The nearest prescription counter was suddenly a county away. Number 5. Eckerd. Ask anyone who grew up in Florida or the Carolinas in the 90s, and they remember Eckerd. At its height, one of the biggest drugstore chains in America, with thousands of stores across the South and East. Eckerd didn't die of starvation. It died of being passed around. J.C. Penney bought it, struggled with it, then carved it up in 2004. Some stores to CVS, some to a Canadian owner, which then sold the rest to Rite Aid in 2007. The name was retired, the signs came down, and one of the largest pharmacy brands in the country simply ceased to exist. Not because customers left, but because balance sheets demanded it. 20 years later, its stores live on under other logos. The brand itself is a ghost. Number 4, Thrifty. West Coast viewers know exactly where this is going, because Thrifty wasn't just a drugstore, it was the ice cream counter. Thrifty Payless ran over 1,000 stores across the West, and its cylinder-scooped ice cream was a childhood ritual for generations of Californians. Rite Aid bought the whole chain in 1996 for about $1.4 billion, retired the Thrifty name from storefronts, and kept the ice cream as a novelty. Which means that when Rite Aid itself collapsed, the last physical traces of Thrifty went down with it. The second time in this video, a dying giant dragged a beloved regional brand into the grave with it. The ice cream brand survives under new owners. The pharmacy that built it is gone twice over. Number 3, CVS. And no, CVS is not dead, but look closely at what it's been doing. For 4 straight years, CVS shrank. It closed roughly 900 stores in a 3-year wave, then around 270 more in 2025 alone. Entire neighborhoods, especially urban cores, watched their CVS disappear. The receipt jokes covered up a quieter reality. The biggest name in American pharmacy was strategically retreating block by block. Then came the twist. In 2026, CVS announced it would grow again, opening around 60 locations, including a new breed of small pharmacy-only stores. No aisles of snacks and greeting cards, just the counter. Read that plan carefully because it's the entire industry's confession in one sentence. The classic American drugstore, the one selling you shampoo, batteries, and candy around a pharmacy, doesn't work anymore. Even the winner is abandoning the format. Number 2, Walgreens. A few years ago, Walgreens was a $100 billion public giant with more than a century of history. Today, it's a private company in managed retreat. The chain announced plans to close roughly 1,200 stores over 3 years, about 1 in every 8 locations. Around 500 went dark in 2025 alone, and protests broke out in neighborhoods that lost their only pharmacy. The forces squeezing it are the same ones that killed the chains earlier in this list. Reimbursement rates on prescriptions crushed by middlemen, foot traffic siphoned by same-day delivery apps, and a front-of-store retail model that Amazon quietly strangled. Under new private owners, the closure plans have been softened. Fewer stores will die this year than originally projected. But softened is not reversed. Walgreens is no longer trying to be everywhere. It's deciding, spreadsheet by spreadsheet, where it can afford to remain. And number 1, it has to be Rite Aid, 63 years. At its peak, thousands of stores and a place in the top 3 of American pharmacy, and then the slowest, most public corporate death in recent retail memory. A first bankruptcy, hundreds of closures, a brief reorganization, a second bankruptcy, and finally, in 2025, the end. Every remaining Rite Aid store in America closed. Roughly 1,250 locations gone in the final wave alone. The prescriptions didn't vanish. Files for millions of patients were sold to CVS, Walgreens, Kroger, and grocery chains, with CVS absorbing more than 9 million former Rite Aid and Bartell customers. But the buildings did vanish, from the corners of Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and hundreds of California towns, many of them corners where Rite Aid was the only pharmacy left standing. One company's failure, and the pharmacy desert map of America grew by entire cities at once. So step back and look at the pattern, because it's not 9 separate stories. It's one story told 9 times. Regional icons get bought by giants and die when the giants stumble. Rural chains get loaded with debt and take entire counties' access to medicine down with them. And the survivors respond not by defending the old corner drugstore, but by abandoning it. Smaller stores, fewer locations, prescriptions by mail, pharmacists behind screens instead of counters. The result is a country where 50 million people live in a pharmacy desert, where researchers can measure worse heart health and missed medications in the zip codes these chains left behind. The corner drugstore was never just a store. It was infrastructure. And America is finding out what happens when infrastructure has shareholders. That corner in your town, if it's still occupied, take a good look at it. Because as this list shows, the sign on it can change, and then one day it can simply go dark. If this is happening where you live, tell us in the comments which chain your town lost. And subscribe, because next on the American Downfall, another industry you thought was permanent is quietly packing up.